KSI's return to the ring is not looking good. Not only is he set to fight Dylan Danis on March 29th for his next fight, but he's now revealed some pretty embarrassing and hypocritical fight offers. So this is the problem with KSI's boxing return. So KSI is coming back to boxing this year. He says he wants to have a couple of fights and challenge himself, take on the biggest and best and the baddest. So he's set to fight Dylan Danis. Obviously supposed to be a warm-up and a tune-up and an easy fight as just getting back into the ring, getting back into the mix. And Dylan Danis is a decent dance partner, I guess, for the promotion. I mean, we saw what he did against Logan Paul, made that build up a little bit interesting. But he's now revealed 4 different fight offers that he made to former UFC fighters that are just not the greatest, to say the least. And he even said no one wants to fight him, people are scared, people don't want to take the risk of fighting KSI, and that's just not what's going on.
And KSI has revealed the name of these opponents, starting out with Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal, to which those are some decent opponents. Jake Paul has even fought against Nate Diaz. Even though they are a little bit older, both Jorge and Nate, they're still decent opponents for him and definitely an upgrade to some of his past fighters that he's fought, such as Joe Fournier or Swarms or any of those guys. It's definitely a massive upgrade, and it's along the same path as Jake Paul has kind of taken. So people would be more happy with that. But then he listed a few other names too that are really shocking, to say the least, such as Tony Ferguson and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. And if you know a little bit about MMA or the UFC, you would know these guys are really washed older fighters who have been on big losing streaks, and fans have been calling them to retire for a long time. And it's not even just the fact that they're a lot older now, a lot more washed than they used to be, not as good. It's also the fact that they are not boxers at all, and they're a lot smaller than KSI. So these fights would just really make no sense at all, and it would kind of be very tough to see KSI go up against these guys. And by him making this move, it's definitely hypocritical, to say the least, because he's been calling out Jake Paul for many years, saying that he just fights retired old MMA fighters and that's all he does. And now he goes out and does the exact same thing by offering even older and more washed and worse at boxing fighters to fight him in his warm-up and return fight. So how does that make sense there?
Yeah, to be fair to KSI, he's saying that, oh, it's because I'm not taking boxing so seriously, it's a part-time thing for me, but he does talk like it is, and he says he's the best in the scene, and then we consistently just see tune-up fights for him, and then the occasional big fight. I don't know why he needs this level of a tune-up / warm-up / whatever in 2025. This guy's not getting any younger. He's 32 years old almost. And now fighting Dylan Danis in a boxing match, like, he's going into fights that he obviously knows he will win, which I don't really see how that helps him, how that even is a warm-up. In my opinion, there's just been too many warm-up / tune-up fights already, and now we're seeing it again, so it's just a chore.
And to these offers as well, there's already been backlash and criticism as to why he would have offered these guys fights. Because just before that, he was going to fight against a retired soccer player in Wayne Bridge, which everyone was completely blindsided by, and had no idea why he would go in that direction, because it just seems very off from maybe his end goal of Jake Paul, and it's just a complete discrepancy of skill level.
Honestly, the worst part is it's just the fact that what he says and what he does just doesn't align. He'll criticize Jake Paul for fighting MMA guys. He'll criticize Jake Paul for fighting older guys. He even had a whole skit where an old man was walking down to be his next opponent, making fun of Jake Paul for fighting older guys, and then announces that he's fighting a 45-year-old soccer player with no real boxing experience besides the one white-collar boxing match and a charity fight. His managers even said he's not going to go the Jake Paul route, he's not going to do what Jake Paul does, and then he goes and announces this fight. It's just what he says and what he does is not aligned, and Tony Ferguson in Big 2025 is not a boxing match that anyone wants to see. That is worse than Joe Fournier, that is worse than probably Pineda. Like, Tony Ferguson, not only is he a 155-pounder, not only is he beyond wash in MMA itself, sure, you could say, oh, he's fighting UFC caliber fighters and KSI is not a great boxer, but Tony Ferguson is just not a boxer. There's levels. KSI's been boxing for 7 years. It's not even comparable. Tony Ferguson is watching his own sport. Imagine him coming out to boxing in a completely different sport. Just would not be cool. And KSI saying that these guys don't want to fight him because they're scared or whatever is just not true whatsoever. These guys aren't scared of fighting KSI. These guys are fighters who will take on anyone. Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal literally fought for a BMF championship which was the baddest mother effers. Guys who would fight anyone, anywhere, anytime, any place. So Tony Ferguson is signed to the PFL. Jorge Masvidal is under contract with the UFC. Nate Diaz says he wants to go back to the UFC. Even Cowboy Cerrone's been saying he might want to come back to the UFC. Like, it's not like they don't want to fight KSI because, oh, he's this scary YouTuber. And I've even seen KSI's coach say, oh, they don't want to fight KSI because if you lose to him, then you're done, you're washed. Like,
the reason is if you get beat by a KSI, you're washed. You're not going to get another paycheck. So the paycheck that they command has to be so substantial that if they don't want to work again, they don't have to. I think realistically speaking, there's a fear factor. If I lose to this guy, I'm not going to fight again. I'll be washed and my rep is terrible.
This is Tony Ferguson we're talking about. He's done. He's washed anyways. These offers and his next fight, his whole boxing return has just kind of been a shambles right now.
Yeah, and it's not even necessarily like he has a short supply of opponents that he could face for a warm-up or for a decent fight or anything like that. They even have Darren Till signed to Misfits, who just put on a very impressive performance against Anthony Taylor, stopping him. And KSI mentioned how Darren Till is too big for him though, and he probably wouldn't want to accept a rehydration clause. But KSI is literally coming up in weight to fight his next opponent, which is Dillon Danis. And this is another guy that people aren't too impressed to see KSI fighting, as he already had a boxing fight against Logan Paul in which he was unimpressive to say the least, barely even throwing any punches, and when he did, it was with very minimal technique or any skill level at all, and it's just not a competitive fight at all. No one's going to be excited really to see it, other than maybe for some build up and for some press conference antics that might occur, but other than that, no one's going to be entertained by the fight because the fight is going to be extremely one-sided, and people are going to expect KSI to finish Dillon Danis, and if he doesn't, then he's going to get even more backlash. So at the end of the day, there were some options for KSI's warm-up, but a lot of the offers that he stated he put out just aren't looking too good, such as the Tony Ferguson, such as the Cowboy Cerrone's, all of these guys on massive losing streaks, and then now coming up to fighting Dillon Danis, who pretty much has a 0% chance of winning. It's just not what fans are expecting to see, and it's really just to question, why is this the path that KSI is going on? Especially if his main goal is to fight Jake Paul. How is preparing for Dillon Danis and fighting him gonna get him ready for the competition of Jake Paul? As much as you might want to hate on Jake and say he's not the best boxer in the world, compared to these guys that he's offering in pure boxing, it's a night and day difference. So it's just weird to see how, like you were saying, he says one thing, does another, and it just seems a little hypocritical and doesn't make sense, especially if that is his main goal.
Yeah, we saw how the best guy out of all these options did against Jake Paul, which was Nate Diaz, where he got dropped in the 5th round. He pretty much got dominated in that fight by Jake, and that was him in 2023. And Jake at the time was coming off a loss to Tommy Fury, the same as KSI is now. About 2 years ago now Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz would still be great options for KSI in my opinion, but it's still hypocritical because he's been saying this whole time, even when Jake Paul was fighting Nate Diaz, when Jake Paul's fighting Mike Perry, oh, you're picking on smaller, older, retired guys. And Jorge Masvidal retired from the UFC not too long ago. Cowboy Cerrone retired not too long ago. Tony Ferguson, I guess, refuses to retire, but he's completely washed. The whole thing is kind of just coming off badly for KSI, but I'm still interested to see his boxing return. Whoever he does fight, people are going to tune in because of the value that he brings in terms of just an audience and his core fan base in the UK. And people want to see him fight Jake Paul because that's been a storyline that's been in the makings for so long. That doesn't mean this next fight and the next options that he kind of revealed as a gotcha moment, oh, these guys don't want to fight me, isn't pretty embarrassing. So let us know your thoughts in the comments down below on KSI's boxing return. Are you guys still interested to see what he has next, and will he step up in levels after the Dillon Danis fight? But if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and check out the video on screen for more punch talk.